So now I think it's maybe time to go from big story generator. Well, actually, we went from social experiment story generator to popular story generator to maybe Dwarf Fortress.
Oh,
Me and
yes.
Tekkud are both here, so this is kind of like an obligation at this point.
Yeah.
So, it's really difficult to talk about Rimworld and then directly go into Dwarf Fortress without just going straight into comparisons. So I'm going to try and avoid that as much as possible. But Tekkud, I know you said that you haven't even been keeping up on what's been going on with Bay 12, yeah?
Yeah, I saw the last devlog for premium version, and I wasn't even able to find the time to click through those links and read the content of the links. I saw the bullet point quick notes, and I'm very happy with what I read on the last devlog. Very excited to see bins get fixed in particular. I'm probably excited for the lamest stuff that other people are like, okay, sure, I don't even use bins, whatever. But I like it.
I mean, come on. How do you feel about the Dwarven underwear situation versus Siegen and Goblin Thong rot? I mean, come on. The fact that situation is stabilized means mental stability for dwarves going forward, and the ability for the dwarves to actually avoid their fetishes of elven underwear and goblin undergarments means that the future for dwarves could be potentially significantly brighter if they can no longer equip them.
I just love that this is a conversation.
Yeah,
and that thong rot is a
thing. There is actually a legitimate concern and threat to the safety of your dwarves when you get sieged by goblins and elves. Right. And this threat is elves and goblins can create something that dwarves can't, which is undergarments that can make underwear. This comes in the format of loincloths and thongs. They can make them as part of strange moods when cursed by the ancient elder gods or an ancient relative to make an artifact. And then, so there is the rare occasion where you'll have an art piece, but those don't get equipped. Those get put on pedestals and left in the corner behind glass. But when there's clothing on the ground, the dwarves can equip it. And it's initially when thongs and loincloths were put into the game, dwarves weren't able to equip them, but at some point, Toady screwed something up in the code where they were suddenly able to equip them. And what happens when a dwarf claims a piece of clothing, it becomes theirs. It goes into their basically their character's inventory, and they can put it away, they can store it, they get sad if it gets destroyed, they want to keep it, right? So they like to hoard clothing, basically. And clothing degrades, and as clothing degrades, they put it away into their storage box, and they go get new pieces of clothing as they become available. The problem is, if they can't make undergarments, because they can't, if they can equip them, then they will want to claim another undergarment. And because unlike Rimworld, in Dwarf Fortress, if something bad happens to a dwarf, that permanently goes into their memory bank and changes the personality of the dwarf forever going forward, essentially. And unless it can get discarded with an overwhelmingly good, different memory of a similar format, which is hard to do. And clothing rotting off of your body is one of the worst, most detrimental mood debuffs you can get on a dwarf. So essentially, it's like psychological warfare, where if you get a whole bunch of sieges, and because clothing gets damaged in fights too, so half the time these thongs that they're equipping are tattered and about to fall apart when they equip them, and they put on these thongs, and then suddenly they're overjoyed with their new piece of clothing that they can now acquire that's been unlocked to them in their inventory. But the problem is then they rot off within a year because they've been destroyed in the fighting. And
yeah, dwarves and clothes. Dwarves and water is the easiest way for a player to go wrong, but dwarves and clothes are probably the recipe for the game to screw itself up. They're the one thing that kind of automatically can just make problems. I have had military squads recently in my streams in the last couple weeks. And they're out to kill a hill titan or something, and I send a few members of a squad out to make sure they have a good advantage. And one of them's like, "Oh, hold on a second. There's a sheep leather glove on the ground over there. I'm wearing wolf leather gloves. I think I'd like that one better." And equip something, to equip an item, overrides the squad orders that you give them. For some reason, that's a higher priority than your orders. So this dwarf just breaks off from his friend and is like, "Hold on a second, dude. I'm going to go get this other glove." And then I look at their inventory, and for some reason, they love to equip one of literally everything. They'll put gloves on and then mittens on top. And they'll put socks and shoes. Well, socks and shoes, obviously, but they'll put gloves on mittens. They'll wear a shirt and a vest and a cloak. They'll wear a cap and a hat, or a cap and a hood. They'll wear as much as they possibly can. And so they're always picking up equipment, and they hoard a massive amount of it. And I like that the Goblin Thong rot, and all that is working. But I'd really like to see civilian uniforms. I'd really like to, because you can set your civilians to an alert. I'd really like to set them to a uniform so that you can tell your dwarves to just not wear so much crap.
I had this one dwarf which was kind of legendary in Long Death. Long Death is a fortress that I've been running since August 2020, and my goal with that fortress is simply to get it to 1,000 years, mostly just proving that I can do it. I'm currently in the mid 400s, and it's just been relegated to like a couple hours one day a week on stream so that I don't bore people into oblivion. But it's not a lot happens in this fort, right? At one point we ended up with a surplus of lead. I had it was like 14,000 lead bars or something. It was ludicrous the amount of lead that we had in that fort. And so I was like, well, I guess make a bunch of lead jewelry and sell it, right? Because that was something that I could just quickly pump out a lot of at high quantities and sell, and it was fine. And so we started doing this, and I'm doing this for a few years, and I noticed one of my dwarves was really, really slow. I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I selected him, and this dwarf was equipped, I don't know, maybe like 50 lead rings, like 80 lead crowns, like a couple dozen lead necklaces, and it's just like, oh, that's why you're so slow. It's because every single limb of you is completely covered in lead, and you're just weighed down, and you can barely move. How are you carrying a boulder? Fascinating.
This guy's just a mid-2000s rap artist, but instead of gold, he's wearing lead.
That or a Final Fantasy character. Just needed lead zippers.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, the antics that dwarves get up to with clothes, there's a few things in the game that are like, all right, this I'd like to see this get fixed, because this is seriously bothering my experience. One is some of the stockpile categories. The whole tools category, it's nonsense. But then clothes, it's a serious, like the whole thing is all over the place. The dwarves wear too much of it. I love the way
clothes work.
You can't dump it,
Like dwarven inventories where like they don't technically wear necklaces around their necks. They wear them on their heads because necklaces and that type of gear was added to the game before necks were added to the game.
And
so we have like this weird grandfathered piece of code where like they equip why am I like completely blanking on what necklaces are called in Dwarfort?
Amulets?
They're not necklace. Amulets, yes. They equip amulets on their heads. So technically like they're like weird crowns. They're not actually going around their neck. The game processes it as sitting on their head or on their face.
That's funny. I was actually just at the end of my stream just today, I was talking to somebody about dwarves, a bunch of dwarves wearing a trench coat, like a whole fort worth of dwarves wearing a trench coat and fighting a hill titan. And then I thought to myself, you can mod creatures to exist as a swarm. I wonder, could you mod dwarves to exist as a swarm? And if you did, would they have the body plan? Could you get that swarm some kind of body plan so it could wear a cloak?
I have no idea. I feel like it would be much more believable to do that with crundles, though.
Yeah, like probably, yeah.
10 crundles in a trench coat. Hi, I'm a dwarf.
Yep.
Crundles are like these tiny little red, like absolutely satanically evil critters that are almost harmless.
Yeah, they're hilarious.
They're just like little idiots who live in the caves.
Their whole plan, their plan of attack. Crundles are actually a serious force of evil. They are very effective. But the thing is, they're not trying to kill your fortress. They're just trying to make everything you do harder. And they're very good at it because they show up, there's like 30 of them, and the first thing they do is they beeline it to your staircase from the caverns before you realize what's going on. And then all of your dwarves are getting interrupted by crundles. And you try to explain to your dwarves, it's a crundle, just step on it, I guess, on your way to what you're doing. You'll kill it, but then they can't hear you because, you're in meat space. So they're just going to keep getting distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of them dies in a doorway and a forgotten beast gets into your fort and everything's history.
Yep. Crundles, man, that's their whole plan. They're just, they're like little zerglings.
Speaking of things that will be
Classic
fixed
crundles.
in Premium in the next version, jeweler jobs are no longer weird.
Interesting. I never considered them weird, but I get it. They work so differently than the other jobs.
Well, okay, so if you go into like your Fortress Manager, right, and you're just like, encrust 50 items with, I don't know, emeralds, right? That number will never count down. Because the game doesn't realize that job's been processed. That's what it's referring to.
The improvement jobs. Okay. I thought it was referring to, again, I haven't been able to like click these links and stuff. I thought it was referring to how jeweler jobs operate on a different mechanic where you select the gem as the job. But no, I guess not.
There's so many things that are weird because like he talked about this in a Future of the Fortress a couple months back, where it's like if you queue up a bunch of jobs in the manager for any jewelry related jobs, it will never count down regardless if it's cutting and crusting or anything. There's certain issues where like certain types, like there's no gems are generic and there's no like generic cut gem job. It's like you have to specify the type of gem, so you get mass cancelizations the vast majority of the time if you don't have the right gem. And like you have to use give and take stockpiles to actually encrust a specific type of furniture. There's no way to like specify what type of furniture or item you want to encrust or what you want to encrust it with. Like there's so many weirdness things about gems.
That's the part that I was thinking. I was thinking the way that gems, for some reason, so wood or stone, you have stone and then you have a material type. You have schist. It's a schist stone. But for some reason, gems, you don't have it's
just a Harlequin opal.
You don't have an emerald gem. You just have emeralds, and then you have rubies, and then you have every other kind of gem as a unique item. And so, the work orders get kind of crazy.
But I'm so much looking forward because like I don't encrust things, period, because it's just too annoying. I just don't bother. Like you can make things significantly more valuable, but like if I can be arsed, like I just don't even bother.
Yeah, I don't do much improvement either. I got to get better at that because I really want to use those materials first of all, because getting them out of stockpiles helps frame rate and it just helps the fort stay kind of small. But also, why not? I always have an excess of labor because I'm too focused on a handful of things, and I could be doing other things as well in my forts. You could always be doing other things in Dwarf Fortress.
I tend to ignore them because the economy has been so simple for so long. It's like the way trading has worked for so long. It's like, screw it. Doesn't really matter what I sell because there's certain items that are basically just like almost cheats or exploits that just have such inflated value over everything else. That's just like, just make me 50 wooden spikes. Go. Okay, done.
Yeah.
Sell those. To the point where it's just like, or infinite like money is just glass, right? Like you can just make glass pipes for all eternity and then just sell that stuff off. But like, I'm looking forward to seeing how like trading changes in Premium and the next update, because it's like I know Tarn completely reworked trading like a year ago, and we've seen the new UI for it and like a few additions, and like the items that you can request, you're only able to request 3 of them. A lot of values have been like reworked and stuff, so curious to see how that's going to change.
I would like to see, I mean, obviously, this is just me thinking out loud. Tarn probably has a plan for it, but I would just like to see some caps on certain types of items, because there are certain things that can be expanded in value beyond reason, like meals, for example, that a meal should never really be worth more than a certain amount to someone, because ultimately it's a meal. Like no one's going to pay more than, even in real life, like maybe you're the one guy who's like, I'm going to go get $1,000 meal, but usually no one's going to pay more than $100 for one meal for themselves, because no food is worth that much. But in Dwarf Fortress, you can just make the best ingredient. You can get the best ingredient and you can mill it and you can add this
my
other
sunshine
ingredient.
wine.
Yeah, you use the sunshine
my roasted
wine
sunshine wine
and whipvine flour and
it's just
dwarven syrup
meals that are worth 40,000 apiece.
Yeah, and they're like, look at this wonderful cake that I've made, which obviously is just like a roast in the game, but the ingredients going into it basically makes a cake, and someone's like,
sugar, flour, lower intestines from a ostrich.
Yeah, and someone's like, so $1,200?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's still just a cake, dude. What? I'd like to see a cap where like meals are just never worth more than a few dwarf bucks each, because know, when would they be?
It's also just fantastic to see that the amount of leather you get from animals is going to be based on animal size.
That's fantastic.
Which means, like, you kill a forgotten beast, which is, like, I don't know, the size of a small bus.
Oh, no.
And so now I'm just, like, imagining about, like, how much leather you're going to get from, I don't know, Osan, the giant farting camel that has red eyes and a shell for some reason and mandibles and and 4 tails that shoots out poison gas. Like, how much... Like,
I don't know, Drongo. Have you ever played Dwarf Fortress?
Yeah, I have played Dwarf Fortress
enough to get into cooking.
It was quite some time ago. I basically went through this phase where I was like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna learn how to play Dwarf Fortress, and I had like, I think it was around 2012. And I couldn't find any really good YouTube videos for it. So I ended up finding, I think it was off Reddit, this like big Word doc file. I think it was like 25 pages of like how to get started in Dwarf Fortress, and kind of talked you through the step by step. And basically I spent like 4 weeks going through this step-by-step process of trying to get my colony running, and I got it there, and then I put it down, and I came back maybe a couple of weeks later, couldn't remember anything, and I was just like, you know what? I don't know if I want to dedicate myself to getting a PhD in learning Dwarf Fortress, and I went and played something else. But I have played Dwarf Fortress, and I really love reading the stories about it. Like the one that always stands out in my mind is the whole saga about cats dying from alcohol poisoning in the bar from licking their feet because the dwarves would spill the beer on the ground and that sort of stuff.
I think the really big difference between learning Dwarf Fortress in 2012 and learning Dwarf Fortress in 2022 is Rimworld didn't exist, and Rimworld does use a lot of this. Like, the games are completely different. Like, I don't even like comparing them because of how different they are.
And they're getting more different as the expansions come
like
out.
they're going in different directions now. Like like in some ways, like biotech, I want to say biology or something. Anyway, now biotech actually adds in some mechanics that Rimworld has, like, you know, kids, right? And also vampires, oddly enough. But same with royalty. Royalty added some mechanics that Dwarf Fortress also has. But Dwarf Fortress is very far in the simulation direction. But like, just the act of managing X number of people and giving them tasks and building up a thing and defending the thing. Like, it's like once you've played a first-person shooter, regardless of how complicated the next one is, you already know how to move forward, backwards, left, and right, and aim and swap guns, right? Like, you could play Escape from Tarkov or Quake, and like there are similar mechanics between those two games, even though they are vastly different games. Both very high skill and hard to play in their own right, but like vastly different skill sets. And that's kind of like where Dwarf Fortress is at now. Like, Dwarf Fortress has actively benefited from the existence of Stardeus, from the existence of Prison Architect, Rimworld, and all that, because that is the game that like put down those ideas as mechanics for a video game in the first place. But like, so sitting down and playing Dwarf Fortress these days, I think is like, the number of people that have just like tuned into my chats that are just like, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Like, I mean, it took me a day, but like, it wasn't that bad. And that is often what I get from people now.
I can't recall exactly, but I went through, I think I gave up on Dwarf Fortress the first time I tried it. I think that was before I tried Rimworld. And then I played Rimworld, and then I went back to Dwarf Fortress to try it out again, and it made way more sense. I think I played Rimworld between my first and second shot, and yeah, it helps tremendously just because you know that you need your little people to make food, and you know you need to put them to, you know, put beds somewhere for them to sleep in. You just know these things that are common to the genre. And you know, speaking of it as a genre, that with a lot of games that share the same sort of core foundational skills and expectations, the first game we talked about, Stranded, Alien Dawn, I think that was the first, really has me thinking that this has really gone somewhere as a genre. Like, Dwarf Fortress made it to, you know, Dwarf Fortress evolved. It didn't evolve. The genre, I guess it evolved into Rimworld. And that was a more digestible 2D format. And now that's evolving. And Prison Architect too, yeah. And now that's evolving into a 3-dimensional format. And hopefully people will make their way backwards like I did, So hopefully someone will play the 3D one and then be like, oh, well, Rimworld's just got better mechanics, even though it's 2D.
I had a really funny conversation actually with one of my teammates, FG Squared, on this very podcast a couple weeks ago, where she mentioned that Stranded is her favorite 3D Dwarf Fortress style game, and I was like, "Honey, you can't do that because like Dwarf Fortress is 3D, which it is.
Yeah,
like it's presented in a 2D plane, but it is a 3-dimensional game, which just because the view position is weird doesn't mean it's not a 3D game. All of the entities in the world are processed by your computer as 3-dimensional objects. So, like, as much as Dwarf Fortress looks 2D, like, weight and size of creatures are processed in centimeters cubed. Which, wrap your brain around that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because another parallel in terms of genre being born from one very popular game, or at least very intelligently designed game. In the case of Minecraft, it was also very popular, is Minecraft and the whole voxel genre. However, Dwarf Fortress's genre that it birthed, this whole colony sim genre, seems to be going like really moving forward into new places, whereas the voxel thing in Minecraft seems to usually just be little experimental games that don't really get very far. But I mean, Dwarf Fortress, in my opinion, in terms of it fathering a new kind of game for gamers, is more successful than even Minecraft. It's been doing very well.
The other thing about Dwarf Fortress that everybody forgets about, and this won't be in premium or the next update for a period of time because it still needs the UI to be reworked, is the other half of Dwarf Fortress, which is adventure mode. And adventure mode is quite literally Kenshi, if you've ever played Kenshi, which is, open world kind of weird party-based RPG thing where you build up a crew of people and you go out and you go on missions, and then eventually you build a base and you eventually build like a small city and you manage that city, and then you get bigger and you get eviler, and then like somebody overthrows you and then your city falls apart, and then you go and you run out into the wasteland and you do it again. Like adventure mode can be that.
Yeah.
If you're good at it. And adventure mode can be even more than that too, because adventure mode, you can go visit your fortresses. You can go visit your destroyed fortresses. Like, your fortress could get overrun by, I don't know, an army of werebadgers, and the whole fortress could collapse. And then, so you, I don't know, make a dwarven demigod hero in a different fortress, part of the same faction, and you go off into the wilderness and you found a fortress using that hero as your spawn point. You build up this fortress and you make the highest quality armor. You base this entire fortress on simply forging the best weapons you possibly can. And then after 5 years of time passes in game, you retire that fortress and then reclaim that adventurer in that fortress that you just spent the last, 12 hours building or whatever. Collect all of the best possible gear and then go out into the wilds and train by murdering wild leopards, I guess, and then go and kill that fortress of werebadgers that destroyed all your stuff initially, grab all your artifacts, take it back to your new fortress, and then reclaim the new fortress, which is a ridiculously open and flexible sandbox that I can't wait until people get their hands on it.
Yeah, I think that
in an accessible format.
That's a very important and big thing to say about Dwarf Fortress to people who don't really know it. And actually, I've been considering doing, upon release of Premium, a little like introduction to Dwarf Fortress for people, because a lot of new people will come to the game, or people who have been watching the game, or even like veteran people. A lot of people who've been playing it haven't really thought about it the way that Tarn has created it, where what you're playing in Dwarf Fortress is the world. When you generate a world and you see, like, okay, 200 years of history have passed, here is your world, that's the game. You're looking at...
That's the character creation.
Yeah, you're looking at the game right now. This is what this is what you're really making. You just happen to be zoning in on one fortress at a time or one adventurer at a time, but the world is your game. And so I was thinking about making a little introduction video to Dwarf Fortress, because a lot of people coming from games like Rimworld and even Kenshi is kind of sort of in the same category. and now these new games like Stranded, Alien Dawn, they're coming from games that started at that zoned in point of view and are sort of
trying to zoom out, maybe.
Yeah, they're zooming out, but they're kind of zooming out blind to what is actually outside in Dwarf Fortress. Because if you think about just Fortress mode in Dwarf Fortress, what happens from the outside? If you're stuck in a box, you get thrusted into Fortress mode, and you don't get any experience of the world. All that happens is occasionally you get raided, or occasionally you get trade caravans, or occasionally
a flying chicken with one eyeball shows up and burns your whole fort down.
Yeah, exactly. So these other games, they take this Dwarf Fortress format, and that's what they see, because they didn't look. They're not inspired by what Dwarf Fortress really is, which is this massive living world. They're inspired by this box. What's it called when you have the box with the language? There's a name for it. It's someone's box.
I was gonna say Rosetta Stone, but I don't think that's what.
No, it's someone's box where you don't really understand what you're doing because you don't know what's outside of the box. You just know how to do it. Anyway, point is, these other inspired games are only inspired by the inside the box of Fortress mode. So when you're playing Rimworld, you get the raids, you get the trade caravans, but what's living in your world? Just generated points of interest on a map that you can go attack. You can visit them, but who inhabits them? It's just random nobodies. Everyone's just a random nobody. And one of them might have the tag, I'm the leader of the random nobodies, but they're nobody, or
they'll have the tag that I'm related to one of your pawns, and then you kill them, and then that pawn gets mad for 30 days.
Yeah. Whereas in Dwarf Fortress, in my last fort at the end, I went out and I journeyed to one site of another civilization, and I stole the slab on which was written the decree by a demon that rose from hell of their existence in now the mortal plane when they arrived and gave birth to a goblin civilization. Like that's where those goblins came from. They had a original demon that broke through into our world from hell, basically. Started creating the goblins, or let the goblins in. I don't know exactly how that works. Crafted this slab, and hundreds of years of history for them occurred, for all of them. I don't know where that demon was. He's got to be somewhere, or he's dead. But I stole his slab and I put it in my tavern.
I love that way of articulating it. I think that's a very cool concept. Like, for me, like, I've been playing for like the last 18 years a game called Worm Online, which is the predecessor to Minecraft. And instead of being a sandbox game where it's very small scale, it's a sandbox game that is a perpetual world, and it's an MMORPG. And one of the really big things about Worm Online that I personally really value is the idea that the game itself is that perpetual world where everything within it has a context and a history, and so you can go out into the world and you can dig up artifacts from past settlements, and you can find ruins of settlements, or you can find a ruin that is recently uninhabited and is starting to be decayed and claimed by the wild, and there's a greater kind of narrative and a greater, I guess, importance to your position within the world. And so I kind of like that way of looking at Dwarf Fortress. That's not something that I've thought of before.
Yeah, I think that's really that. So the original intention behind the game, right? And this is pretty much written as what Tarn wanted to make. Tarn and Zach is that you would start with a fortress in order to establish some kind of home base or some sort of familiar point of interest in the world. But then ultimately, you would be able to take what you've created in adventure mode, just like Blind was describing before, and go out and interact now on behalf of your fort, or just on behalf of your adventurer, or whatever you want to do, and interact with the world as a whole. And so really, it's kind of written into lore or just written into fact that Dwarf Fortress really is about the world. It's not about your fort. Your fort is just a means of interacting with that world. And people have kind of lost track of that because the game has so far and for so long kind of had adventure mode as an accessory. But I think Blind, I think you're right. Once adventure mode matures, people are going to be like, oh, wait, this isn't just about making forts.
You can build a fort in adventure mode.
You can, yeah.
Like straight up, you can play Dwarf Fortress within adventure mode. And there's also a DF hack command right now and plugin that actually lets you seamlessly swap between Fortress and adventure mode. So like as those two modes develop, and once those like seams between them kind of get severed a little bit, like even in its current format, completely vanilla, like you can do a lot with adventure mode. But I'm just really, really curious to see, like, well, I mean, like, you know, I'm sitting here like positioned to profit quite heavily from the release of Premium Dwarf Fortress, right? Because like that is a large portion of my content. That's the vast majority of where my like views come from, and I look at it and I go, I really, really hope that people latch on to Dwarf Fortress and understand why it's different than everything else that has attempted to copy it or emulate elements of it, but enjoy it for what it is. And I hope that they stick with it long enough that when we get the fully reworked version of adventure mode, which are both going to, I think, come out faster than people realize. Like Dwarf Fortress is going to release soon. And when I say that, I mean, it's basically ready to go.
I describe it as
it's imminent.
Yeah.
And like I keep getting like shady DMs from people saying like, hey, you're going to be busy in X time frame and stuff like that. And I look at that and I go, I hope people like it when it releases. I hope people latch onto it, and I hope that they stick with it long enough that when adventure mode is also released, that they try that. Because the biggest problem that I think Dwarf Fortress has had is learning Dwarf Fortress is kind of, it's not an easy task. Even if you have played Rimworld, even if you have played other games like it, and you understand what the game wants you to do, it's still not easy. It takes time. I mean, for me, it was maybe a 15-hour learning curve for me. When I sat down, I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it. And then after that, it was just learning the muscle memory. But a lot of people don't have that kind of time to, you know, just dedicate to bashing their forehead against a wall until they understand what they're looking at, right? And I really, and so most people, they get into Fortress mode because that's what's more accessible. That's where there's more tutorials. That's where there's more community around. That's what's publicly available to an interested audience member. But adventure mode is kind of like this weird cloudy thing. Like I did a poll on my YouTube channel a couple months ago that was just like, what do you play? Fortress mode, Adventures mode, and then Legends mode, which is almost a joke. But Legends mode is just where you go and read about worlds. Because my older sister plays Dwarf Fortress, but she doesn't play either mode. She just generates world and reads Legends. And it was like 2% was Legends, 7% was Adventure, the rest was Fortress.
Yeah,
wow.
I look at that and I go, I really hope that we can extend that adventure a little bit, because more people need to look at adventure mode.
Yeah, I think that also the not just the accessibility, but Dwarf Fortress, when I was away from Dwarf Fortress between my first attempt of playing it and when I really got into it, I was playing Rimworld, and a lot of the reason I wasn't still trying to play Dwarf Fortress is because I thought, well, why don't I just play Rimworld? It's just an easier Dwarf Fortress. Because what sets Dwarf Fortress apart? What makes it worth playing as opposed to the more accessible things that look like it is currently kind of hidden. It is in Legends mode. I mean, there's adventure mode too as a means of playing differently than Fortress mode. But in terms of what the game is and contains,
that's the world generation.
Yeah, that's different than something like Rimworld. It's kind of hidden. You kind of can't see it right now unless you go looking for it. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to, I'm thinking about putting a video out that's just like an introduction to Dwarf Fortress, concurrent with the release of Premium. Hopefully people will go looking for it and find it, hoping to find tutorials on how to get started. Of course, I hope they find those as well. But if they can find an introduction video that's like, by the way, don't stop playing this just because it's harder Rimworld. It's not harder Rimworld. It's actually this whole world that no other game has. This is the only place you're going to find it.
Easier Rimworld.
Well,
it's a much easier game to not die in.
It's a mechanically harder Rimworld, but once you know the mechanics, it's extraordinarily easy to make a safe fortress.
Mm-hmm. It's extraordinarily easy to contort the game into what you want it to do, which is the point of the game.
Yeah. And yeah, so I really want people to just see that there is something in Dwarf Fortress that's big and it's important, and it does not exist in any other game. And that, you know, if you show people that, they'll be like, oh, okay, it's worth learning how to play Dwarf Fortress, even if I already know how to play Stranded Alien Dawn or Rimworld, because I can't get a living world with 500 years of history and the daughter of a king who's married to my mayor and, you know, has lost two kids.
Drunk in the tavern on the ground for some reason.
Yeah, and went insane because her kid died to a werebeast attack 3 years ago.
Speaking of insane, I had a necromancer lady show up who was already nuts. She was just like already like phased out of existence, running in circles naked, like crazy, right? And I couldn't expel her because her spouse wasn't present. But her spouse then showed up in the next migrant wave, and almost immediately she had a kid. And of course she can't take care of this kid, so she just like threw him over her shoulder and just like kept sprinting around screaming. And so I've got this naked like lady necromancer that has like 5 kids now, and the kids are just like almost exactly like 9 months apart and just like on the ground, just crawling around because mom refuses to take care of them. And dads in Dwarf Fortress aren't very good. Like they don't even realize they have kids most of the time, I think. So they just kind of ignore them. So it's basically just like I've got these babies crawling around, and then people run by and dump a bucket of water on them when they get thirsty, and like to throw food at them when they get hungry.
Jesus.
There you go. Gotta raise those
We are
kids.
getting chores though in the next version. So kids that are more than 1 year old can haul and clean, and also between that and guild halls, we can use those as schools, and so you can actually have like well-skilled and talented kids by the time they grow up.
Nice.
Just got to put the toys in the forge.
What a
guild.
Yeah, what a happy coincidence. And I am 100% sure that there was 0 crosstalk, so I'm sure it's a complete coincidence that we're seeing an amazing expansion for a great game over at Rimworld that involves children being an opportunity to make great contributors to your colony, as well as children being advanced into contributors in Dwarf Fortress.
I mean, they've been that way for ages.
I mean,
we got guild halls like 3 years ago now.
That's true. I guess the big difference is that they can now have jobs. So, I mean, I suppose it's not that much of an advancement, but they can work.
Children do as they please.
Yeah. The thing is, I think we might be able to strength train them now. So.
Well, I mean, if they can carry boulders, you can strength train them.
Exactly. You're gonna have a lot of hauling.
Although
to do, kids.
I'll be nice. I'll give them wheelbarrows. I mean, it's better than the days of like making Dwarven daycare, which is just like yeet the children into a pit and throw food in sometimes.
Right. Look, little Melville, I'm going to need you to put on 35 lead necklaces.
That's why we can't have uniforms, Tekkud.
Okay. I see.
Kids' uniforms.
For child abuse.
What do the
problems.
children wear? Nothing, so that they don't get scarred when their clothes fall off. Also, 50 lead necklaces.
Yep, exactly. You just need to be wearing necklaces and bracelets.
And rings.
Yep. I think platinum is heavier than lead, isn't it?
Yeah, but platinum's not very accessible.
Yeah, but we could have maybe enough platinum to get one kid walking around with enough swag to, attract the merchants.
Wait until he's unbelievably strong and completely indefatigable and completely unbreakable, and then transfer to the next one.
I brought this up to the Dwarf Fortress Roundtable guys. Have you been paying attention to the size of your dwarves in the military?
So I can't because I don't use Dwarf Therapist. So
I have been noticing dwarves in excess of 120 kilos.
Which is like a bear.
It's literally...
I was watching your stream and you're like, that's like a large bear. Like,
it's literally the size of a black
dwarves
bear.
are like 4 feet tall.
Yeah, it's the size of an adult black bear. I was like, This is double. One of them was 130 something centimeters cubed, basically double the size of a human.
Instead of Fat Bear Week, you should have Fat Dwarf Week.
I should. So, I was thinking, if we have a kid, right, and we give him 35 lead necklaces, and then we put him in the military as an adult, we may very well have a juggernaut on our hands.
Are you suggesting we start breeding dwarves for their military ability?
You know, I'm saying
we're breeding genetic super soldiers.
I'm saying that everyone needs to grow up into their own unique, personal, contributing role in society. And if that happens to be as a freakishly large military powerhouse, then,
Brick.
Yeah.
House, please.
Okay, brick, yeah. Maybe then they should be able to reach their potential.